All right, so just in case you missed it from our audio issues, this is our blue spotted salamander that we've had for about 3 years. And we were just talking about how they get about between 10 and 14 centimeters. We talked about how their tail takes up most of their body, about 40% of their body, and the males have a little bit flatter tail. You can see this is a female because her tail has a little bit of a rounded curve to it. So these guys eat pretty much just insects and slugs and worms, spiders, all that kind of good stuff, you know. And then their predators are primarily just fish and frogs because they're not that big. So they're just pretty much eaten by anything that's going to be around them in their habitat. They do have a defense mechanism of a, they kind of release this like milky toxin on their skin that doesn't make them taste very good. And they can also release their tail and it will regrow back. Like I said at the beginning, these guys are also called mole salamanders because they often will actually live in the burrows of small mammals like moles. And so they'll actually kind of take over those little nesting areas. So they kind of have earned themselves this little nickname of mole salamanders. All right, do we have any questions from the crowd?
Nope, not currently.
All right, so I am going to move on to our next salamander. He's actually one of my favorite animals here at the Nature Center. So what I'm doing right now is I'm spraying my hands with a little bit of water. Salamanders have really, really sensitive skin. Like I said, we kind of impact this species and they impact us a little bit. But they are very sensitive to water pollution and they actually need to have their skin keep constantly wet. So I always spray my hands before I handle any of our salamanders or our aquatic amphibians. And so spray a little bit more so we can get our next guy out. All right. So this here is our eastern tiger salamander. And we have had him actually since 2015. So he is about 6 this year. He is also a wild capture. We got him in April of 2015, once again, due to our scientific collector's permit. So we are allowed to collect certain native species as long as they're not endangered or a species of concern. So these guys are obviously a little bit bigger than our blue spotted. I believe that this is a male because he is actually technically small for a tiger salamander. They typically can get up to 13 inches long if they're a female, so they're pretty big.
And what do they normally eat?
So these guys eat kind of the same thing as our other salamander, as the blue spotted, but these guys, the females get big enough where they can actually eat other small amphibians and even small mammals like mice. So we can't have them in the same enclosure because he might try to consume.
And what are their predators?
So these guys are also, when they're babies, they're hunted by those fish and those other amphibians. But once they get bigger, since these guys often are on the land, our blue spotted salamander primarily likes to hang out underwater. These guys are a little bit more terrestrial. So they actually get eaten by birds, snakes, foxes, otters if they're native. And then their eggs can also be eaten by beetles, turtles, fish. The eggs and the larvae are all eaten by those aquatic animals as well.
And how big do they get?
Oh yeah, and they can, their size varies, with the males kind of hanging out around this like 6-7 inch size, and then the females can be 12 to 13 inches, so they're almost a foot long sometimes. So we think this guy's a male because he's not very big. Any questions from the...
No, not currently.
All right. So the last thing I want to talk about is the environmental impact of these guys, or rather on these guys. Like I said, it is Salamander Saturday. And so one thing that happens, especially with the tiger salamanders, is their larvae are often used as bait for bait shops. So you'll find populations of them outside of what's called their natural range, just they get to areas where they shouldn't get if they survive as that larva and manage to mature and breed. And then also, like I said, they're very sensitive to pollution, so these guys are a really good indicator of clean water. If you see a salamander in water, it means that it's generally not very polluted or toxic because their skin, like I said, is very, very sensitive and absorbs a lot of those toxins. So they're very susceptible to water pollution, And they are very susceptible to like temperature pollution, like heat and cold and stuff too. So we got to make sure that we are being very mindful of our impact on these species, because we don't want to affect them in a negative way. So, yeah. So thank you guys for joining me on Salamander Saturday. I will end this with a little close-up on one of my favorite animals' face, because I just think he is too stinking cute not to show off to you guys. So that is our tiger salamander, and he's going to go right back in his little box, and we will see you guys next week. All right, bye-bye. Happy Salamander Saturday.